To AARP and its members, thank you for continuing to have this conversation. Um, I think this workshop, this conversation is more important than ever with all the things that our nation is challenged with today that we're facing. The work around creating livable communities is very much at the intersection of solving a lot of those challenges. So thanks for continuing to hold up this platform to talk about these issues and the solutions that we can bring forward. So what I'm hoping to do today is give you a little bit of an aperture into the priorities that Caltrans is still holding up, despite all the things that are toiling around us. We still have been able to hold on to many of these priorities because we believe if we can create a safe, accessible transportation system and resilient transportation system, that we can continue to make a difference in creating a better quality of life for people across the state. So for those of you who are not familiar with California, I don't know what the entire audience looks like with the 1,200 people who are dialed in, but some of you may be very well familiar with this. But our state has a population of roughly 40 million. We have the fifth largest economy in the world pre-COVID. I think post-COVID, that will probably still likely be the same, because many countries around the world have taken a hit as well. But we're only behind Germany, Japan, China, and the United States as far as the economy in the state. And Caltrans is the agency that helps move that very large economy. Our network of responsibility of over 50,000 miles of highways. We engage more than 300 transit agencies, if you can imagine that. 17,000 bridges, 100 tunnels, 400 public use airports. So our responsibility is vast. We have a vast team as well. We have over a staff of over 21,000 within the department. I mentioned what's been toiling around us, and many people who are listening in have had to battle and experience these same issues as well. I don't think anybody has been able to avoid this. With COVID-19 in California, we're closing in on 15,000 fatalities. I think at the national level, we're probably at 195,000 now. We're closing in on 200,000, unfortunately. And a lot of us got a chance to see the Memorial Day of this year, the inequity challenge post the George Floyd incident. Got a chance to see the injustice issues that this country is still struggling with. Some may not agree or understand how much of an issue this still is, but it very much is an issue. And we at the department here, this is a focus for us. Equity issues are a key focus for us in the department. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And also the economic impact from COVID as well. More than 30 million jobs lost in the country rather. In 1 month alone in California, the month of April, we lost more than 2 million jobs in our state. But I call these the three pandemics, but this graphic was, staff created this for me about 2 months ago, 2 or 3 months ago, in the middle of the peak of a lot of these challenges. But, you can add on 3 or 4 more things right now. Climate change is very much an issue here. If you've seen our Governor Newsom, he's been talking about this quite a bit yesterday. President Trump was in town this week and right here in Sacramento, and this was a major point of discussion. In LA and Los Angeles this week or last week, temperatures got up to 120 degrees. And we know, I think some may still debate this. There's not much of a debate from my end, but there's very much a connection to the fires that we're experiencing. So that's a fifth. That's a fifth item. A sixth item that you can definitely point to, creating more livable communities is the homelessness crisis that we also have in California. We have more than 150,000 people that are homeless in the state, closing in on 200,000 people by some estimates that as far as homeless people in the state. So these three are what I call the three pandemics in our state, but we have very much our own list of challenges that we're still battling through on many other fronts. But these are the 5 priorities. I started my role roughly 11 months ago at Caltrans, and together with the leadership team, formed the priorities that we will be focusing on for the time to come. And safety, modality, innovation, efficiencies, and partnerships and stakeholder engagement. I think if we can continue to achieve success in these areas, we will see the growth, we will see the improvements that we want to see in creating communities with better choices, improved quality of life, and improved livability across the board. So this is the lens through which I'm going to explain how we're making progress in the state. So from a safety standpoint, unfortunately, we hold the mark for having the most number of people killed annually on their transportation system as far as states go in California. Roughly 3,600 people die every single year using our transportation system in California. That's 10 a day. 10 people every single day die. At least 3 of those, or close to 3 of those, are the most vulnerable users of the system. People who are looking to walk, people who are biking, or trying to access transit. Those are the people who are almost 3 out of those 10 on our transportation network. This is a point of emphasis for me. I don't want this to be a talking point for us as a department to just be able to say, hey, safety is our number 1 priority. I get tired of hearing that because I, for one, want to actually see real action taking place. When you say something is your number 1 priority, I believe it should be aligned with your resources, with your actions, and your policies as well. And so we are going to continue to make change in this area in California because we want to see definitely that number, that 10 a day number, continue to go down in our state. A majority of those fatalities, as I mentioned, 7 out of the 10 are people who are driving. And surprisingly, I think some people may not be aware of this, but if you look at the National Household Travel Survey, the most recent one from 2017, more people who are seniors are actually driving across the country. If you look at the bar, the 3 middle bars, that's the population between the ages of 66 and 89 in this country. And they are the population that is actually seeing the most growth in driving across the country. And surprisingly as well, millennials, I think we've noticed the fact that millennials are more engaged in things like micromobility and technology in recent years. And I think the expectation was that the number of millennials driving would actually go down, but that's not actually been the case. Number of millennials driving actually is seen a little bit of an increase. But the biggest concern on this graphic is the fact that more people between the ages of 66 to 89 are driving. And in our state, when you look at that a little bit more closely, the people age 65 and over who are who are being killed or having serious injuries in California, 45% of those are in Los Angeles, and you can see the breakup in this graphic. Fresno and the Bay Area having the other significant part of the people who are being killed who are 65 and over driving. And why is that the case? It's mostly because of turning movements, drivers who are turning or driving at speeds that are higher than they should be driving. Our second priority is modality. Some of you who may be familiar with a little bit of my background, I've spent a majority of my career working specifically on this issue, and glad to come to a state here in California where it's a focus as well. It's a focus for the administration. It's part of why I decided to come here. But we can't continue to just invest in the highway, building new highways. I think the days of building giant freeways through our communities, those days are long behind us. I don't think we achieve any of the true mobility goals we have by building major new freeways. I think we have to diversify choices, mobility opportunities for people by investing more in walking and biking and transit opportunities. And on the highway side, I think the focus should be more on maintaining that infrastructure, making sure it's up to date, and that's how we will continue to be able to achieve the goals we have for mobility. Now, why invest in a diverse transportation system? Some who may still not understand why we need to do this. If you look in California specifically, just an example of why we need to invest in a more multimodal system or improve modality. In California alone, I mean, these are the top 10 cities that without cars in their people without cars in their household. In the Bay Area, just in San Francisco alone, almost a third of the people there do not own a car, whether it be for choice, be by choice rather, or economic reasons. That's the case. And if you look across the United States as well, here are the top 10 cities. But if you go below these top 10 cities that you see here in this graphic image on the right, there are cities like Toledo, Ohio, or Allentown, Pennsylvania, in the middle belt of the country, where the numbers are in double digits as well. You're talking 15, 14% of households, either for economic reasons or by choice, do not own a car. Hence, again, the need to invest in a system that allows people to be able to get to destinations without having to drive. And so, mention the other challenges that we face, and many parts of the country face especially in urban areas, face some of these challenges as well. Combating climate change, the affordable housing crisis that we face as a nation, and very much in California, and the congestion issues that some of our urban communities face. At the intersection of solving those challenges, at solving those problems, very much is creating a more multimodal transportation system. If you look across the country and look into where people are spending a significant part of their gross income on housing alone, I think the experts recommend that you spend 25 to 30% of your income, your gross income, on a household. But if you look across the country, in many cases, some places are spending more than 40%. So in this graphic, the red that you see, 40%, people are spending in these counties are spending more than 40% of their gross income on household related expenses. Unfortunately, California happens to be one of those states that this is the biggest issue, as you can see all the red across the counties in California. But very much the coastal areas across the country, this is an issue as well. We know that there's a significant senior population in Florida, so a coastal state as well. You see a lot of red there. You go up north in the Northeast, the same thing. But it's not just the red. All the dark brown that you see or orange looking color, those are people who are spending 30 to 40% of their gross income on household expenses like rent and paying a mortgage. And this is where modality comes in even more. The more that we can create a diverse transportation system, the more we lessen the impact of people having to spend so much on households. The other part to this challenge, the climate challenges that we face. When you look at this data from the EPA, 26% of GHG across the state comes from our industry, comes from the transportation industry. And at the top of the tier is electricity generation. Burning coal and other natural gases represents 30% of at the national level, the GHG challenges we face. But if you come to California, that number is actually significantly higher on the transportation side, from 26% to over 40% of the GHG emissions coming from the transportation industry. So if we want to solve our climate challenges in the state and across the country, uh, look no further than many of the transportation decisions that we're having to make as a nation, and definitely in this state. Governor Newsom has made this a priority. One of the things that he's done is he, at some point last year, in the middle of last year, he announced Executive Order 1919 to reduce emissions in the state. One of the ways that we can do that is very much investing in zero emission vehicles. We have a goal in the state to reduce GHG to 40% below where it was in 1990. We plan to do that within the next 10 years. Over the next 10 years, it'll be a tough feat, but it can be done. Investing in zero emission vehicles, electric vehicles will be a big part of that. But very much the multimodal system that we will be able to create will help us achieve that as well. So, how do we get there from a multimodal standpoint in California, from a modality standpoint? I mentioned earlier, part of the way to get this done is our actions, our policy decisions within the department, and where we put our resources have to align with that priority. One of the decisions that I made very early on, as you can see from this news release, was we pulled $100 million away from projects that were not in a timely phase, in a timely cycle to get done. Pulled $100 million from those projects to invest in walking, biking, and transit-related facilities for the state. Not the easiest of decisions, but when you think about the need and the demand and where we need to head, with the goals we have as a state, the priorities we have as a state, this was very much a decision that we needed to make, and aligns with, again, the idea that our policies and our resources must meet that. So next we have a poll question. I'm not sure who's going to sort of help us do this, but the question is from audience members, if you are participating or if you can participate. What is the greatest impediment to transportation for older adults? If you're logged on, and I see how the scale is working here, it looks like increasingly, car dependency, accessibility are almost neck and neck, back and forth. I'm going to click through this in a second to keep us moving. Transit schedules is a close third, but I think you can continue to do this. Well, it's done. Okay. So number one is accessibility. So that's the biggest impediment for older adults is, access to things like transit, walkability, bikeability, especially I bet that's the case when we talk about accessibility. Safety is a big part of that. If people don't feel safe, if speeds are too high, that also plays very much into access. And I think a close second in this graphic is car dependence. The fact that we have built our communities and cities to be very much dependent on having to drive places has come in second. So I'll keep going. Number 3 on our priority list in California is innovation that we're going to be focused on as a department. I like to call California the innovation capital of the world. Some people would argue that it's a city like or a place like Japan or Tokyo, a city like Tokyo, Japan. I think it's right here in California. When you think about all the investments being made in Silicon Valley, right here in the state, I believe our department should be very much in line with so much of the growth that's happened in the technology sector in the state. And so that's one of the focuses for us as a department. But when you think about innovation, for our state, the senior community or the aging community can be very much a part of the innovation that happens in the state. There a lot of states are seeing that their senior population is growing. I think when we think about the senior population, a lot of people automatically, your mind goes to a state like Florida. But as this graphic says from a report here in California, the future actually is Florida. It's right here in our state and probably in your state as well. The total population of people 65 and over in Florida was almost 4 million. In 2030 in California, that number will be over 9 million, in a mere 10 years. And that's going to be, for the population 75 and over, 4.38 million. So a significant amount of growth for us in the state as far as the senior population goes, and they can be very much a part of the innovation that happens here. But one of the things that we're doing from an innovation standpoint, as just an example, is this integrated ticketless travel system that's being worked on in the state. And we're hoping it's a prototype for the rest of the country as well. Our plan, the project that's being worked on by Caltrans and many other local transit agencies and other state government partners, is we're linking micro mobility opportunities like scooters, the rental bicycle systems with rail transit, with bus transit, so that you can have one pay system to use between these different modes. I mentioned earlier that there are over 300 transit agencies in the state, and of course, multiple micro mobility opportunities to use, dozens in the state as well. And if you every single time had to look for cash or had to look for a different card to purchase, that inhibits the growth that needs to happen and the efficiencies that we need to generate here. So we're working in California to link the entire system. We already have a pilot underway. This is a tall order, but if we can get this done in California, I think it changes the landscape for the country as well to integrate mobility opportunities across the board. Fourth is efficiencies. We have a $15.5 billion budget at Caltrans. And I think sometimes when you have a large budget like that, some people think we can just rest on our laurels and we have a ton of money, but not so much. That's not the case. We want to see how we can get the best out of the funding that we do have. Part of the reason why our budget is as significant as it is the voters in California 3 years ago in 2017 approved SB1, the largest transportation funding in the history of the state, the largest increase, a $5 billion annual investment split evenly between state and local government. But the important part of that to me, the exciting part of that, and this was before I got here, was that people across the state had the foresight to say a fifth of that investment, of that $5 billion annual investment, needs to be in multimodal opportunities. $750 million, to transit, $100 million to bike ped, and $25 million to other planning investments related to multimodal transportation. But we very much need to have, again, an outlook towards efficiencies as we make those investments. We're called to by the law, by the SB1 bill that passed, to save annually, $100 million. In 2017 and 2018, $123 million we saved in efficiencies, and this very last cycle, we saved $233 million, or identified $233 million in efficiencies in the work that we did. That work is guided by CTP 2050. It's guiding a lot of the decisions we're making in the department. It gets towards a lot of the things that we're talking about today, from safety, improving accessibility, environment, infrastructure, economy. But the exciting part about, to me, this long-range plan, this CTP 2050, is the blue graphic you see there, the fact that our team understands, and I think the community is calling for this as well, very much that the images on your left, that transportation plays a key part in quality of life, in public health, Equity, absolutely. I think we're realizing that more than ever, and climate issues. I think the traditional things that long-range plans at state DOTs focus on are on the right of the graphic. What we are not talking about as much, or we haven't in the past, are issues like public health, equity, and climate. And glad to see that our transportation plan for the next 30 years is very much including that as a priority. And fifth and final, if we're going to, as far as our priorities, if we're going to achieve the goals we need to achieve as a transportation agency here in California, we can't do it in a silo. Some of you may be aware that I spent most of my career doing planning work, and very much want our department to be more engaged with stakeholders through our planning processes, through every phase of project development, and every policy that we do. Very much engaged with partners, with stakeholders as we do that work, and not do the work in a vacuum. Because I think if we're going to achieve the true essence of what we want our communities to be, we have to do it in a partnership, in the form of a partnership. And we understand, I think now more than ever, when we talk about equity, the impact of not doing it in a true partnership. If you look at how freeways and interstates and highways have very much divided communities across the country, and we see the aftermath of those decisions, we recognize that we didn't make those decisions in true partnership, 50, 60, 40 years ago as we were building these mammoth infrastructures. But as we move forward today, our plan is that as we reinvest, as we invest in these same communities, the same intentions we had then to be harmful in some cases, to have negative impacts or understand those negative impacts and still move forward. My hope is that today, as we make these investments, as we make new investments, it's very much with the same intent, but with the intent to improve these communities and bring these communities that we divided even to higher levels of success and quality of life than they've ever had before. That's very much the opportunity before us, and we can only do it if we truly listen, and we do it in the form of a partnership. So this quote is one that when I run into challenges in our space, and this is the last graphic here, when I run into challenges in the last 8 or 10 years after I found this quote, has been a source of inspiration for me, because there have been times in my prior responsibility when I was a deputy commissioner in Tennessee where I felt like I was getting nowhere. And I think a lot of us experience that often, or we run into that challenge sometimes where we just say, boy, I'm just tired of this. We're not getting any traction. We're not getting any growth, any movement on it, creating more livable communities, or improving the quality of life. These investments we need to make, we're not heading in the right directions. We're not making the right policy decisions. But this quote serves as an inspiration for me over the last 10 years, and I'll read it and we'll close. Nothing is more dramatically apparent than the inadequacy of transportation in our larger urban areas. The solution cannot be found only in the construction of additional urban highways, vital as that job is. Other means of mass transportation, which use less space and equipment, must be improved and expanded. Perhaps even more important, planning for transportation and land use must go hand in hand as two inseparable aspects of the same process. This quote, you could say somebody said it from very recent times, like somebody said it within the last decade, because it's very relevant to the challenges we face today in the built environment space and the transportation space. But this quote, this part of this message was delivered by none other than President Kennedy. President Kennedy, 60 years ago, 60 years ago, if you can imagine that, this was a message from him. The reason why this gives me inspiration is because it's a reminder that this work that we're doing, that all of us are doing, is the work of a lifetime. You don't achieve the success you want to achieve in any particular area overnight. President Kennedy was saying this 60 years ago after the passage of the largest infrastructure investment in the country's history at the time to build highways across America by his predecessor. And he was saying, look, that job is vital. That job is important. We don't need to not do that, but let's not forget the investments we need to make in mass transit. Let's not forget that transportation needs to be very much linked to our land use decisions 60 years ago. Here we are today, very much a relevant conversation or a relevant quote still. So let this continue, messages like this continue to remind us and inspire us that this work doesn't stop. It's the work of a lifetime, but we can very much achieve many of the goals that we want to achieve in creating more livable communities for people of all ages. So thank you for, again, inviting Caltrans to be a part of this conversation, this workshop. Kudos to AARP. Continue to push forward on efforts like this, because I very much believe it will help us with many of the challenges that we face in our nation today. Thank you. So I would love to take some questions. I don't know how much time I burned. I was just talking away. So I'd love to have a dialogue if possible. Danielle.
We'd love to have you talk all day. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Director Omishakin. As a born and bred Californian myself, I couldn't be happier that you're at the helm of the Department of Transportation in my home state. We have a lot of questions, and frankly, I am having difficulty prioritizing them because they're all wonderful. But let me start with this. And this is actually from a California colleague. In the face of climate change, how can state and local transportation agencies like Caltrans drastically reduce vehicle miles traveled, which are a primary source of carbon emissions?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Danielle. Thank you. Thanks for putting that one first. To me, again, that's at the center of everything that's going on. Is, if we're going to achieve VMT reduction, we have to have policies, and we have to make investments that align with that. And I think we're headed in that direction. There's a bill called SB 743 that has been slightly controversial in California. If you're not familiar with it, I think it's worth looking up if you're in another part of the country. Essentially moves us from looking at reviewing new transportation projects and land use decisions, moving from looking at LOS, level of service for cars, like, how much of a delay a car has at an intersection, moves California from making decisions based on that to VMT. So we're going to be judging in California, actually starting today. Today is when this actually kicks in, September 15th. Starting today in California, we will be reviewing transportation projects and land use decisions based on VMT. So how much vehicle miles will have to be traveled by that investment. So policies like that will help, but just investing in the infrastructure as well is absolutely key to making these changes happen. I think, unfortunately, one of the silver linings from COVID-19 is the fact that we're having to telework more than ever. For us as a department, I think we have roughly 15,000 people that are eligible to telework. And at some point, we had 13,000 people in the department teleworking. We moved from 200 to 300 people teleworking in the department to 13,000 within a matter of 2 weeks. So things like teleworking will help with VMT, sheerly investing in the infrastructure, building more walking, biking, transit facilities, And the land use decisions that we make with bills like SB 743, I think very much help with that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. There's a couple of questions here that I'll try to bundle together. You mentioned cities in the middle of the country seeing double digits in non-driver households. How do we make our state DOTs align with that future? Arguably, many state DOTs still put car as the primary vehicle, the primary mode. How do we begin to change the culture within state DOTs so they really do have sort of a wider appreciation for those that don't own cars, can't drive cars, or don't choose to drive cars?
Boy, that's a tough question because the state DOT varies. I respect my peers across the state who run large operations at state DOTs. It's not easy. I was a number 2 guy in Tennessee, and this was something when I mentioned that quote before, that quote from President Kennedy. That was one of the things I sort of had pinned up on the wall to kind of help remind me that this battle has been going on for decades. This is not something new. But I think cities and nonprofits who are working on these issues have to continue to try to invite themselves into the conversation with state DOTs, regardless of how big and influential they are. So regardless of how much Caltrans has going on and how influential it is, I expect cities, I expect regional planning agencies and NGOs working on these issues, I expect them to engage us and ask us questions about the decisions we're making. If you're in a more rural state, it's a hard conversation to have with them to say, hey, you need to invest more in walking opportunities or bike. It's a really tough conversation. But I think once you invite yourself to the conversation, helping the state DOT understand that by investing more in these areas, to create more livable communities, they can achieve their goals as well. I can tell you that most state DOTs, their focus is, moving cars as much as possible. Not all. I'm painting with a pretty broad brush here, but most moving cars, moving them safely, because it's a majority of the transportation that we have in all 50 states. Moving them safely. Some are focused on economic development, but tying the goals that we have or that you have as an entity to those goals that most DOTs want to focus on, like economic development or safety, and helping them realize and understand those mutual benefits even more. I think helps them. I think helps a little bit, but also having good leadership, leadership that gets it, fighting for people to be in chief engineer roles or chief planning roles or CEO roles or CFO roles who get the need to do more investment in this space. I think matters very much as well.
Fantastic. Here's another really important question I'd love for you to tackle. How do transportation organizations, and I'll flag there it's organizations, not just state DOTs, develop a culture of equity in which they're embracing equity in all of the transportation decisions and not simply as a checkbox or a chapter in a report?
Very good question. Again, that's an astute question because I think we get very comfortable with saying we got the plan done and we get it done and it sits in a corner somewhere and it's the favorite dust collector. But to me, I think this again, there's a guy named John Maxwell who likes to say everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. He's a leadership guru. I think you need leadership in your state DOTs or city DOTs who understand this issue, and are willing to make policy decisions to head in that direction. I'm not sure I can come up with a better answer because you need people at a leadership level who are willing to take the steps, even though they're not easy. We're taking some steps here in California. I'll tell you just briefly. I'm focusing on 3 Ps. I like to put things in groups and bunches, but we're focused on 3 Ps: our people, our projects, and our partnerships from an equity standpoint. But from a people standpoint, our department needs to start to represent at every level, at the executive level, all the way to the entry level, the rank and file level, represent what the state of California looks like. Our state's very diverse. 20% of the state is made up of Asian Americans and African Americans. Hispanic population makes up 40% of the state. So how do we as a department start to reflect what the state actually looks like? So that's our people, our projects, the way we build projects. I talked about this before. The way we build projects needs to very much include the voice of the underserved community. And I could talk about that more, but in the final P, the partnerships part is the fact that close to $1 billion of that $15 billion budget we have can go to small business and DBEs, and the fact that we need to make sure that that money is getting is truly getting across to as many small businesses and DBEs as possible. So that's the vantage point that I have on equity for our state DOT here, but it's not an easy conversation. I can tell you the jobs I had prior in senior levels, equity was not in any way part of the discussion. It just wasn't. That may have changed in some of those organizations today because of what we're going through as a country, but you got to keep leaning on your leadership in these organizations to start to head in that direction.
Thank you so much. I regret that we have so many wonderful questions here that I can't throw your way. Some of them do come with a lot of kudos to you and Caltrans for your leadership, so I want to make sure that we pass that along. But thank you so much for your time, Director Omishakin. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all the wonderful questions. I apologize we couldn't get to all of them.